We'll pick up here where we left off in the last one with example 8. So again, this is in the right format. Y is by itself. Y equals mx plus b. So we always start with the b. B here is -3. Negative because of the minus in front of it. This is our Y-intercept. So we start by putting a dot right here at -3 on the y-axis. Then we go to the slope. We see that our slope is 1/2. We write rise over run beside it because that reminds us what we're doing. We start at the point we already have, and this tells us to rise 1 and run 2. So we end up right here. We can do it again. Up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. We could also go the opposite direction. We could go down 1, left 2, down 1, left 2, down 1, left 2. So that gives us this line when we draw it. Notice again that it goes uphill from left to right. That's because the slope we had was positive. So now let's look at this. This is not in the format of y equals mx plus b. So we're going to look at it a little differently. Let's go back to our points. This says that y is always equal to -4. So we'd have -4, -4, -4. It doesn't say anything about x, so you can choose x to be anything you want. And we'll just say 1, 2, 3. So let's plot these points. So that would be right 1, down 4 for this first one, and then right 2, down 4 for the next one, and then right 3, down 4 for the third one. If we draw a line through those points, we get that. And that's the equation of this line. Because it just says y equals and then a number, it crosses the y-axis at that number, and to cross the y-axis it has to go horizontal. This is one of those horizontal lines. It has a slope of 0 because it's flat. There's no rise to it. So let's look at this one. This one says x equals. So again, let's look at our xy table. Because it tells us x is equal to 2, it means that x is always equal to 2. But it tells us nothing about y, so we can make y be anything we want. We'll just choose 1, 2, 3. So when we plot those points, we would go over 2, up 1, and then over 2, up 2, and then over 2, up 3. So we'll draw a line through those points. And we get that. And this time it's a vertical line. Goes straight up and down. It crosses the x-axis at 2 because this said x equals 2. This has an undefined slope. It's too steep to measure. And that happens anytime we have an x equals a single number because there's no y in that equation. So all horizontal lines cross the y-axis, and they would be y equals some sort of number. All vertical lines cross the x-axis, and the equations look like x equals some number. So let's graph x equals 4. Again, without putting points in. If it's x equals, that means we need to put a dot on the x-axis at 4, which would be right here. And then it has to cross through that axis, which means it would just go like that. So this one is the same sort of idea. This says y equals -2. There's no x in it, so we'll just put a dot on the y-axis at -2 and then make it cross that axis like that. So in example 13, it says find the slope and the y-intercept of this line. Now this is in standard form. which means it's not in the right form for us. Remember, we want y to be by itself in order to graph. So the first thing we would do is subtract 20 from both sides. We get 4x minus 5y equals negative 20. And then we need to move the 4x to the other side. So we'll subtract 4x from both sides. So that gives me negative 5y. But I want to write the 4x first, the negative 4x. So I write negative 4x and then minus 20. And that's because in this equation, my x part is first and my number is at the end. And then finally, I need to divide each piece by negative 5. When I divide, I have to divide everything in the equation by the same thing. That cancels out there and leaves me with y equals. Here, the two negatives cancel each other out, and I just get 4 over 5x. And here the two negatives cancel out and leaves me with plus, and then 20 divided by 5 is 4. So, from this equation, I can now see that my y-intercept is 4, and my slope is 4 over 5. Okay, and it told us to find those things. It said find the slope and the y-intercept. So we need to write that out, showing that we found them. When we graph, remember that we start with the y-intercept. So we're going to put that 4 on the graph. And then our slope is 4 over 5. And that's rise over run. So that would mean up 4 and then right 5. But that is so far off our graph that we're going to do the opposite of it. So we're going to go down 4 and then left 5. I get a dot right here. And then we'll draw a line through those two dots. And that's our graph. Okay, one more thing. We'll talk about x-intercepts and y-intercepts. We can find them in equations by making the opposite letter be equal to 0. So if we're finding an x-intercept, we make y equal 0, and then we solve for x. And we put this point, because it's an x-intercept, on the x-axis. To find the y-intercept, we make x equals 0, it's the opposite letter, and then we solve for y. And because this is a y-intercept, we would put it on the y-axis. This gives us 2 points for that line, because each of those steps are separate. And then we would just draw a line through those 2 points. So let's look at an example. So here we have 6x minus 2y equals 12. So the first thing we'll do is we'll find the x-intercept. And to find the x-intercept, we make y equal 0. So we would have 6x minus 2, this is where y would be 0, equals 12. Well, 2 times 0 is 0, so that just cancels out because anything minus 0 is just what we started with. So we get 6x is equal to 12. We can divide both sides by 6, and we get x is equal to 2. Now that's a point. That's the point right here on the x-axis at 2, or we could even write it as a point, 2, 0. This is x that we just found. This is y because we made y be 0 at the very beginning. Let's do the same sort of thing with the y-intercept. So we'll make x equals 0. So we write our equation, but this time it's this x that's becoming 0 right there. We're going back to this beginning equation each time. Well, 6 times 0 is 0, so that cancels out. So we just have negative 2y equals 12. And then we divide both sides by negative 2. And we get y equals negative 6. So this is a point on the y-axis at -6. We could write it as a point 0, -6. And remember that this is an x that comes from at the very beginning right here. And then the y that we just found from right here. So 0, -6 would be off our graph a little bit. It'd be down here. And then we would draw our lines through those 2 points.